Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to my train wreck of a channel. So, sorry that I haven't been on here for a hot minute. I was actually in St. Louis for about a week, and when I came back, I was not feeling all that great, so, but I'm better, so that's good. So anyway, I put a poll on Instagram asking if anybody would be interested in this topic, and shockingly enough, people were. So if you watched my tattoo story, I talked a little bit about like the background of why I find this tattoo so interesting. So we're gonna dive in a little more today. Just to give you a little picture, a little background, I guess. This actually happened 5 years ago where I was living in St. Louis and I was working for Hyatt, and I was like wanting to move up in the company and also wanted to leave St. Louis. I just was kind of like, I want to see what else is out there. So I had a manager that actually worked with me, and she recommended for me to move to a location in Arizona, which coincidentally enough, my dad lived in. So I was like, cool, like this will work out, be a great way for me to like move up in the company, see my dad again. So I like go through the process of applying, interviewing, and I finally get the job. Meanwhile, for like 6 months prior to this, I'm like experiencing all these weird things happening, and I'm like trying to figure out what's going on. Like for instance, I developed this really annoying shake and I was like losing muscle in my legs pretty much all over. So like I got to the point where, for instance, I had to have help standing up, which was kind of annoying. So my mom was like, oh my God, what if you have Parkinson's? Like, you know, you're only 25. So like that gets in my head. So I'm like, okay, I gotta figure out what's going on. And also I was having horrible pain in my lower back, which I assumed was my kidneys. And I like grew up with a lot of kidney issues. So I was kind of like, gotta be something with that. So I originally go to my my doctor, like my not personal, I'm so important. Anyway, my general doctor, I go see him and I'm like, hey, so like, what's up? What's going on? And I had like neck pain, and I was like getting like swelling in my neck as well, which if you're like a 25-year-old like vain girl, you know, you're kind of like, not really a cute look to have chunk neck, you know? So he's like trying to do all these tests. He's like, I don't really see anything wrong, blah, blah. So I figure, okay, it's like in your imagination, whatever. Meanwhile, at this point, I'm still like trying to, you know, figure out how to like get to Arizona, like how to move up the company and everything. So I'm like trying to ignore all this stuff happening because I'm like, clearly it's like in your mind. It's probably just stress. Well, then like one night I get off work and I'm like texting my friend and I'm just like, I'm in a great deal of pain. Like, I don't know what's going on. Again, like lower back is hurting. I'm like, oh my God, what if I have a kidney infection? Like, ugh. So she's like, well, we should probably go and get you checked out. So we go to a hospital. They, you know, do a test. They like all that stuff. They're like, oh, well, other than like white crystals being in your urine, which I'm sorry, that's disgusting, but like it's kind of pertinent to the story. He was like, I don't really see anything else wrong. We could like prescribe you like cranberry pills or something, but like it doesn't look like anything's wrong really. So I'm like, oh, again, I'm being a hypochondriac. Cool. Love it. So we leave and everything. Another like couple of months goes by, and like between me going to this ER and like seeing my general doctor, it like wasn't that big of a, I think it was like 2 months span in between. So I'm like, again, I'm like, okay, like let's focus on the interview process and like trying to get to Arizona again. Like you're just stressing, blah, blah. Well, then I had another instance where like my lower back was hurting and I was like, I just like don't, and again, like my shakes are getting worse. Like my muscle weakness is getting worse. So I'm just like getting frustrated, and my job is physical. So I'm like, I can't be going around just like dropping things or like not able to lift stuff. Like I need to do this for work. So I go to an urgent care. I'm like, okay, like let's at least try one more time. They do all these tests. Again, nothing comes back. I'm like clear. I'm like, okay, giving up. I'm done. I'm not gonna like go into this anymore. I'm just gonna like live my life, and maybe it's just stress like acting up. Like once I get to Arizona, things will be better, you know. So fast forward to like a week before I'm going to Arizona, like in that time frame, I still have a crap ton of stuff to do. I have to like figure out what I'm selling, what I'm taking, how I'm like getting there exactly, all this stuff. I've like gotten the job and I'm like super stressed, and I still have all these weird symptoms going on. My feet are super swollen at this point. I'm just like, great, I just look like a big hobgoblin. That's so cute. But again, I'm like more focused on all the stress of getting ready to go to a different city and like start a new job and all this stuff. So I'm like, okay, I only have a week left of being in St. Louis. I need to like go, I need to get on my grind, all this stuff. So I like go to work one night, and I have digestive issues anyway. So I like kind of had a cramp in my like lower left side. I just kept assuming, because sometimes I get that pretty normal. So I'm thinking, oh great, I'm just gonna be uncomfortable for work all night. Blech. Anyway, like I go to work, I do my thing. I was like working in room service as a server, so I have to like run all over the hotel. It gets to the point where I start noticing like this pain is spreading. It's like all over my entire like trunk of my body at this point, and it's getting worse, like almost unbearable. So I'm like trucking along. I'm like, no, I just gotta like make it through the rest of the shift. Like, bleh. So it hits at one point that I'm just like, I can't, like, I'm like walking, taking orders, like hunched over. I like can't stand up straight. I'm just like, this is not a good look for the hotel. Like that's where my mind went. Not to the fact that I was like, I'm in a lot of pain. Maybe I should like chill. It was just like, I have to look professional. So I like go back to like our, like the back of the house, like our room service area. I talk to the order taker. She's like sitting in our office, and I'm just like, girl, you and I gotta switch. I can't deliver any more orders. I'm gonna like, I don't know, like explode or something. So she's like, okay, like you go ahead, you sit. And at this point I'm like sweating, and I'm just like, even if the phone rings and I have to like talk to anybody, I have no idea how I'm gonna do that. I'm like in that amount of pain. So I like look at her as she's getting ready to go, and I'm like, I need you to like grab our manager. And so she just like looks at me and she's like, are you like trying to go home? I was like, girl, no, I'm trying to go to the hospital. Like, and like anybody who knows me, I'm like, I hate going to the doctor. I hate, like, I won't do it. Like somebody could stab me and I would just be like, no, I'm good. I'd just like pull it out, and then like, it's good, it will heal on its own, it's fine. I hate them. So for me to say, I think I need to go to the hospital, everybody's just like shook, you know, they're like, oh my gosh. So my manager comes around, he like looks in the office, and he like sees me sitting there, and I'm like head down, like sweating, you know, and he's like, how you doing? Being real cheeky. And so me still being me, in that moment, I just looked at him and I was like, how does it look like I'm doing? And so he's just like, straight up, he's like, not good, you know, and he's like, so do you want to go home? And I was just like, I don't even think that I can make it home. And at the time I lived like a 5-minute walking distance away from this hotel. So the fact that I couldn't even fathom like walking there, he was just like, ooh. So I called my roommate at the time. I'm like, hey, I'm leaving work. And she goes, oh my God, like, what's going on? Are you sick? And I'm like, yeah. So she goes, oh, are you just like gonna come home? Do you want me to like make you soup or something, you know, like, or tea or whatever, thinking I have like a flu? And I'm just like, girl, no, I think I need to like go to the hospital. I need somebody to like take me, you know, all this stuff. So she comes, picks me up, and meanwhile, like in the car, I'm still in so much pain, like the most pain I've ever been in my entire life. And so halfway there, all of a sudden it just like doesn't go away all the way, but it very much, it's like way more tolerable. It's like a very little amount of pain. So all of a sudden I'm thinking, and I'm like getting kind of loopy at this point. And so I'm like looking at the window and I'm thinking, I'm like, I wonder if I should just tell her that I don't need to go anymore. Like I could just like go back home. And then I think I'm like, she'll kill me. She'll like straight up kill me if I'm just like, I'm good. Cause like we're already like halfway to the hospital. So I'm like, there's just no way that like me being like, just kidding, I think I just need to go home and sleep is gonna go over well, you know? So we get in there, they ask some questions and they take me back. Mind you, this is like kind of fuzzy because again, I was like very out of it at this point. So they take me back, they do my vitals, everything. And so they're asking me all these questions. I'm just like out of it. I'm like thinking about like Taco Bell at this point because I'm trash. So my roommate, thank God, takes over and she's like, all right, like answering all their questions because I'm just staring off and I'm like, I'm really hungry. I could really go for some nachos right now. So all of a sudden I hear them say, wow, like your heart rate is really high. And so my roommate steps in and she goes, well, she just like gets really nervous in medical situations, blah, blah. And I'm like thinking like, thank you. Because there's no way in like my mental state I'd be able to like conjure up those words to explain what's going on, you know? Well, then the nurse goes, no. She's like, her heart rate is almost 200 beats per minute. So I like look over and I'm just like, and I like see it on the little board. It says like 196 beats per minute or whatever. And I'm just like thinking the entire time, I'm like, that's not normal. Again, that's how messed up I was. I was like not in the right frame of mind at all. Understandably, they just like take me back to a room and I like get changed. I don't remember half of the stuff. Like I just remember to the point where like I was laying in the bed and they like come in and they ask me, they're like, do you need morphine since you said your pain was so bad? You know, like that's what brought you here. Like, do you need morphine or whatever? Mind you, I'm like flying on my happy cloud of like not knowing what's going on. So I just like look at her and I'm just like, nah, I'm good. They like kind of look at me, kind of like shook, you know, they're like, you just said like on a level of 1 to 10 for your pain, you were at like a 9 if you don't want any pain medication. I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. Whew. Still got that Taco Bell on my mind, you know? So then all of a sudden I'm laying there and I'm like starting to realize like how out of it I am. And like they've put in the IV and everything, which is, you know, disgusting. I have like PTSD from like how many times I've been stuck and like had IVs put in me and everything from this whole situation. So I'm like laying there and then I do like, I'm like staring at this IV and I'm just kind of like, so I like get it in my head that they've drugged me. I like look at my roommate and I'm just like, I like look from the IV to her and I'm like, they gave me morphine and I told them not to. And she's just like, Jess, I've been sitting here the entire time. Like, that's just saline. They just put, like, they told you that when they put it in, you know? And so me thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, this is just gonna be another situation where they say, oh, you're fine. And then they send me to like go home. And I'm like, well, I'd really like the, you know, chicken nuggets and something. I'm really hungry. So I'm like, I know for a fact, this is the only thing that I feel like stuck in my mind while I was so out of it. I was like, if they give you morphine, I know for a fact they have to keep you overnight. Couldn't remember that 196 beats per minute wasn't normal, but I can remember that if they give you drugs, you have to stay in the hospital overnight. So she's just like, no, like they didn't do that. I've been sitting here the entire time. I know they didn't give you morphine. You're fine, you know? So I finally just like let it go, but I'm still like in my own mentality. I'm like, they drugged me and now I can't have my chicken nuggets, you know, just like very upset. And then, so they like come in to do these tests and everything. And there's like one nurse that comes in to draw blood. And I am super squeamish on anything with needles. I already have an IV in this arm. She's about to like go ham on this arm. So I'm like laying there. And so I already know I like look away and I just like make a joke with her. I'm like, look, you can't watch that. Like I'll pass out, you know? So she gets going. She like gets the needle in. And so I'm like making eye contact with my roommate, just like hyper focusing, which poor thing at that point, I can only imagine. To me, I'm thinking, I'm just like looking at her like, I need moral support. Really, I'm probably just like staring, you know, trying to like focus on her and not the needle in my arm or the multiple needles in my arm. So all of a sudden, while I finally get my happy place, the nurse goes, just breaks me a bit. She's like, wow, that's a lot of blood. It's like a fountain over here. So like my gaze kind of like falters. I like start to look and then I remind myself, I'm like, no. So I like look back at my roommate. She's like across the room from me and she's like not squeamish by any means. I see her eyes just go like this, like it looked like she's seen something that she shouldn't have ever seen that will like never leave her, you know? And I'm just like, oh God, it's that bad. So the nurse gets finished, she leaves. So like at that moment, I decide whatever's on the TV, I'm like, I don't want to watch this anymore. I want to watch something else. So of course, like in the hospital beds, they have the remotes attached to the bed. So lucky for me, it was on the same side as like my exploding arm, apparently. So my roommate, she's just like, well, don't look. She was like, I'll just tell you where to put your hand. Just don't look to your right side. And so I'm like, it must be bad, you know? So I'm like, okay. So I'm like following her instructions. I like get so hot in the face, impatient after all of like 30 seconds of trying to find this remote. I'm like, forget it, not worth it. So I like look over, big mistake. First I see just like blood all over the side of my gown and then like all over the side of the bed. And then here's the kicker, like 5 feet away on the floor, just like spattered all over. And so I was just like, I was a bloody fountain, you know, just like so shook. So I instantly am just like, never mind, I don't need to watch anything. So a doctor comes in, they're still like trying to figure out what's wrong with me. And he strongly like comes over, looks me dead in the eye, and he's like, look, your heart rate, your blood pressure are really high. Like you should probably try to sleep. And so I'm just like looking at him. I'm like, yeah, totally. And then I just like go back to just like zoning and just like staring at the TV, just like not even trying to go to sleep. So of course he goes to my roommate. He's like, this stupid idiot's just like not gonna listen to me. So he like goes to my roommate and he's like, hey, you really should try to get your friend to go to sleep. Like if she continues to stay awake and we can't lower her heart rate, she could go into cardiac arrest or something, you know, just crazy stuff like that. He leaves the room. My roommate comes over just like very harshly. She's like, you need to go to sleep because you could have a heart attack or something. She's like, do you want a stroke? Do you want that? No, you don't. Like, go to sleep. So I'm like, okay. So I like look at her, and the way to motivate me to get to go to sleep, I'm like, once I wake up and like we can be discharged and everything, can we like go get food? I'm really hungry. Not at all concerned that, you know, there is the risk of me dying. So she just like, to appease me, is just like, yeah, sure, whatever, just go to sleep. So I like almost immediately pass out. Next thing I know, she's telling me, she's like, I have to go home. I had been in the ER for like a couple hours at that point, and I'm pretty sure they told her that I obviously wasn't going to be leaving that night. So she's like, I'll just let me know when you're able to get out. I'll come back and get you, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, you know, like real sad or whatever. So I like go back to sleep. I wake up to a nurse coming in like with a wheelchair. And she's like, okay, like we're going to take you up to your room or whatever. And so my mind just like hears something totally different. I hear her say, we're just gonna take you to a room until your sister comes pick you up, which I hadn't even told my sister that I was in the hospital at this point, because I'm thinking they're gonna like let me go, you know? So I'm like, oh my God, these people are wizards. Like they know how to contact her and all this stuff, like just out of my mind. So I start collecting all my things. And she's like, okay, like get in the wheelchair. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I can walk. And she's like, no, seriously, like get in the chair, you know? So I'm like, okay. So I like get in the wheelchair. She takes me up to this room. So of course I like immediately pass out. I'm just like so out of it. And I wake up to just like being rolled off to like go get another test done. Just like that was like my life for the next couple days. Just like waking up and being taken to different rooms to figure out what was going on. Also bear with me for this entire time. I was again like very out of it. I don't really have a great memory on what happened because again I was just like out of my mind. But I do remember at one point, so I will remind you, I had like this swollen neck thing going on. To this day, I have a problem with people touching my neck because of it. I wake up to somebody just like feeling on my neck. And I'm like, well, hello. So I like open my eyes, I see the dude like just feeling all over this goiter, which is like what they kept calling it, which is what it's called. I just like didn't know what it was called beforehand. So he's like feeling on it and he's like, oh yeah, like really study that goiter. And I look over and there are like 7 other people in this room looking at my swollen neck. And by luck, a few of them are cute. So I'm like, cool, they're looking at my fat, like freaking Jabba the Hutt looking neck, like love it. And also I'm perturbed. Like you don't get much sleep in the hospital. People are just like coming in and out, like doing tests on you. And like, I'm like, this is like the one time I had time to like fall asleep and y'all are just feeling all over my neck. And you couldn't wake me up first to like warn me, you know? Anyway, so that happens. And I just like, pretty sure I like passed out while one of them was feeling on my neck because I woke up and they were all gone at one point. So the first official day that I was like in the hospital, like after I gotten some of these tests done, my mom comes in and like I don't remember letting her know. I think I like texted my manager and then like my sister and I was like, hey, I'm in the hospital, like I hope I don't get fired, you know, kind of thing. And so I'm pretty sure like my sister must have told my mom I was like in the hospital. So next thing I know, she just like comes shooting in, you know, like her coworker comes in behind her. My mom takes one look at me and she's just like, oh my God, and just like starts sobbing. And like one of the doctors is like still in the room, like talking to me, like I know what the hell they're saying. So my mom's just like sobbing and I'm just like, get so embarrassed. I just look at her and I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like thinking the entire time, I'm like, there's this doctor in here, like my mom's just like sobbing over seeing me in a hospital bed, like how embarrassing, like not even thinking the extent of like how horrifying that would be as a parent to see, you know? I'm just like, God, get your stuff together, you know? Like she like starts trying to like ask me questions and I'm just like looking at her like, don't know what's going on, like you know as much as I do. I end up leaving and then one of my friends came to visit me as well and he's like talking to me, like trying to figure out what's going on. And any time I'm like in any vulnerable state like that, I feel like I always want to turn it back around and joke because I like worry about people worrying about me. It's just like very uncomfortable. I think it's something where I'm like, no, I have to make that person laugh, like I can't let you like be upset over me. Ugh. So like I start making the dumb, and you know how like the like hospital beds will have those little remote control things where you can like recline or like sit up or whatever. So I like kept playing with that, and for whatever reason I thought it was the funniest thing to make it like have me sit up and start acting like Dr. Evil. I was just like, oh, $1 million. I think that's all I kept saying the entire time. And like, God love him, my friend just like laughing, you know, he's like trying to appease me kind of thing. I'm sure he was probably like, what is wrong with you? And I feel like everybody that was coming to see me was like trying to remind me like, dude, you almost died. Like, do you understand the gravity of it? And to me, I'm just like, I'm Dr. Evil, man. My favorite is probably when my sister came to visit me. So she came to visit me the last day that I was in there. And so she like comes racing in and I'm like, cool, like now I got somebody who can like make a joke about this with me. So she like, I can tell she's like starting to get like kind of serious about it or whatever. And I'm like, nah, we're gonna be in fun jest land. We're not going to like, oh my God, this is so tragic, blah, blah, blah. So I like do the thing where I like sit up in the hospital bed and I do the, I'm Dr. Evil, like, meh. And so she starts like almost cry laughing. And so like in the middle of it, just all of a sudden, like no warning, she just like cuts it off and she just looks at me dead in the eye and she's like, do you realize that you almost died? So I just look at her and I'm like, way to be a Debbie Downer, Megan. Of course, I finally, you know, like get discharged. They like give me my medication. They give me like the update on what I have. Apparently I had a thyroid storm, and on the level of where I was at, they said within 30 minutes, had I not been in there, I would have died. Like my organs were overworking so much because my thyroid was overworking that my organs were in the process of shutting down, which is just absolutely insane. And I feel like I didn't really take that seriously until a couple of years later. And I was talking to a couple friends that, I promise this kind of links it together, you'll see it, I promise. But like, they were a group of friends that I worked with that were into, you know, experimenting with drugs and everything. And while that's not my forte really, I feel like I already have too much going on in my head. Don't really need to add drugs and alcohol to it. I just get stressed. It's too much. But they were talking about a drug that I had never heard of before. And so I just like happened to hone in whenever I heard them say, yeah, like this is a drug that you could do. It's like basically a natural chemical in your brain that releases while you're dying called DMT. So I like snapped up and I was like, wow, that's because I just like heard the natural part and I was like, that's kind of interesting, you know, like, so what is the experience on it? They start describing it to me and 100% it's just like how I felt when I was in the hospital, like with the thyroid storm going on. So that was like the first part where I like really was just like, oh my God, I did almost die. Like that's crazy. Like I feel like every time somebody was saying that to me, I was like, you're being over dramatic. I'm fine. Like, figure it out. But oddly enough, hearing somebody talk about their drug experience was like the point where I was like, wow, that's insane. I like didn't realize that I like cut it that close till a couple years after this incident had happened. So kind of crazy. So like now I always make the joke, I'm like, God, I'm like a cockroach, like nothing just like takes me down. Yeah, just like after something like that. And then, you know, like a couple days afterwards, I like end up driving down to Arizona and I'm like out of my mind on all these meds, you know, and I like made it there safe and sound. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, that's like a lot of weird circumstances where I'm like still here, you know. Kind of interesting. Sorry if that seemed jumbled. Again, like I'm still not feeling 100% right now, so I feel like I'm like mentally jumbled all over the place. Hopefully that was entertaining. Hopefully somebody can like take something away from that. Like, ooh, even if you have these weird symptoms and somebody is like telling you that they can't figure out what's wrong with you, maybe get a second opinion. Don't just like give up like I kept doing. If you like this video, leave a like. I would really like a comment. Just let me know what you thought about this whole situation, because it's still pretty weird. And I will see you guys in the next video.